Welcome to Season 3 of Connecting with Purpose. In our first 2 seasons, we explored how leading and living with purpose unlocks unique potential for us and our teams. This season, we're diving into how purpose helps us navigate change, build resilience, and elevate our ongoing performance, well-being, and impact. A special focus I'm really excited about is to highlight the transition of elite athletes into new opportunities. By raising awareness around this largely untapped talent pool, we'll bridge opportunities with businesses to create meaningful connections, drive value, and deliver lasting impact. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in.
Right, well, welcome everyone. Season 3, Episode 3 of Connecting with Purpose. I've been really looking forward to this one. I've got Dr. Adam Russell here. Adam is the Director of AI for USC's Information Sciences Institute. In addition to, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief Vision Officer for AI at DARPA. And these are a couple of roles that Adam's had so many government agency roles and led different areas since 2009 within different government agencies. Adam's speciality is being a research scientist. He specializes in human behavior, social behavior, and AI, really through the lens of national security. His achievements, innovations, and exploits are so extensive and far too long for me to list off here. So you really will have to check out his bio in the notes for all the juicy details. It is very impressive. And despite Adam's incredible intellect, which you are soon to see, we actually share a couple of things in common. Adam has a BA in Cultural Anthropology from Duke University, and Adam may not know this about me, but I studied Cultural Anthropology as part of my degree at Durham University in the UK. Adam has a doctorate in Social Anthropology from Oxford University, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, and for anyone that doesn't know what that is, just Google it. It is impressive. So that's obviously an incredible achievement, but for me, well, I played rugby against Oxford University, so that's about as high as my educational exploits got. Adam also played rugby for Oxford, 4 varsity games, and he also represented the USA men's national team, which happens to be an experience we're both honoured to share. Adam also served as a high performance director for the USA women's national rugby team for their 2014 and 2017 Rugby World Cups. Really excited to have Adam here today, talk a bit about his career, a bit about his perspective on human performance, and also tying the dot or connecting the dots there to elite athlete performance and what that transition looks like for athletes and what that opportunity could look like. So, Adam, welcome. Please edutain us.
All right. Well, I'll start by correcting you. Unfortunately, but it's not your fault. It is true. Like, I don't know how accomplished my career is, but it's all over the map. And so, you know, if you ask like ChatGPT or one of the large language models about my career, my biography, it will come back with things like, you know, I ran DARPA for 4 years, which is wrong, but you know, I can see why the machines get confused. So just to be clear, I am currently the director of the AI division at ISI, right, at University of Southern California. I'm also currently on loan to the Department of Commerce in the government, where I'm the Chief Vision Officer for the AI Safety Institute. So trying to stand up a new institute in the government to essentially radically promote our ability to enhance the trustworthiness of these AI systems. But you're right, I did time as IARPA, DARPA. These are the advanced research projects, agencies, and activities that are supposed to do what are called high risk, high reward research, which is relevant, by the way, I think, to our conversation going forward, because where you have high risk, you also have high failure. And I think this theme of failure is really important in my life, not just because I routinely fail, but because I think it's actually one of I mean, if I succeed at all, it's because I fail. Anyway, so with those constraints around there, indeed, the thing that's most important is I share this with you, Mark, is that we both had the privilege of representing your country at the national level for rugby, and most recently, of course, I want to make sure we get this on record. You worked with me to do something that, frankly, I should have done 30 years ago, but I didn't know you then. And I'm happy to unpack that as we go forward.
Well, yeah, I really enjoyed working with you. And yeah, Adam's referring to the fact that I'm a purpose and performance coach. And so part of my day job is supporting really successful people in articulating their purpose and using it as a lens through which they can sort of focus and perform best in their life. And so Adams was one of the most very engaging folks to work with on that, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, we can dive into any elements around that seem relevant. But I traditionally like to kick off the podcast with, when you're thinking through a lens of how you've gotten to where you're at, using the lens of magic moments, which any of the guests that have listened to this are familiar with it. But the very headline introduction on magic moments is that they're moments that when you look back on them, with the benefit of time, you would give them a 10 out of 10. And you give them a 10 out of 10 for two reasons. One, because it may have been how you performed in the moment, regardless of whether it's a positive moment, which you might think a magic moment might be, or actually you were handling a big challenge or a trauma or maybe even a tragedy or something. But because of how you handled it in the moment, when you look back on it, you're like, yeah, that was pretty amazing. And the other part is then how that impacted what came next in your life. And that's why the benefit of time kind of plays into it. So if you were to try to distill down your entire life into three magic moments, or just three magic moments that seem most relevant as to how you've gotten to where you're at, what springs to mind? What are the moments? What is it about them that made it magic? And if you had to give them a name, what would you call each of them?
Oh wow. Okay, I have to name them, which is both exciting and a little intimidating. I'm given to, as you know, neologisms like edutainment, right? So that you'll have some of these things pop up. I might invent new words on the spot. Right, magic moments. So again, my background is in anthropology and social science, so I'm completely aware that humans are storytelling creatures, and they will tell stories usually untrue. They're actually stories we use to make sense of our lives and what goes around us. So I can't actually verify the factual accuracy of these things, but I would say the first magic moment that I would highlight, and it may be a compilation of moments, was when I was a kid. My parents were divorced. My mother remarried a man who was in the State Department, and so from about the age of 10, literally till probably university, I was moving to different parts of the world on a fairly regular basis. Which is, on paper exciting, certainly unique and uncommon. But, when you're 13, what you don't need? You don't need to be taken to an entirely new culture and have to figure out quickly, like, okay, so why is Michael Jackson not cool here and it was cool over here? Why do we do these things here and we don't do it there? I just figured this out and now I'm in a new space. And so there was this sort of constant sense of dissonance, like the shapes just didn't fit, which was hard. I'm not going to lie, though I'm also aware of how privileged an upbringing it was. So I don't want to, what was me. But the magic moment that comes out of that was when I remember being back in the United States for one of the summers that I used to spend back with my grandparents, and talking to some friends where I mentioned how I was at that point living in Equatorial Africa, in Gabon. Of all places, right? One of essentially three English speakers in my class, and I made some observation about how the sort of Gabonese do something, and my friends didn't think of me as weird. They thought that was really interesting, and they wanted to explore that a little more. Like, well, what does that mean about how we do? I mean, I was impressed. They were all sort of like closet anthropologists. Now that again, fairly young, but that was a magic moment for me because I realized actually that my experiences, though I weren't particularly enjoying them at the moment, were actually valuable. They were valuable to other people too. So there was something to be learned. And I'm not saying it was the right thing, but it was clear that like there was something I could offer to other people that I thought was really, really magical. And so, it continued to be difficult, but I think now, even in retrospect, these times when we don't think like we fit, when we are struggling, those are the things that you're going to be able to take that are most value for other people. At least I try to remember that. I think related to that, the second magic moment would probably have to be, a rugby moment.
Time out. You got to name it. You got to name it.
I would call it. I'm trying to come up with a new neologism. So there's information that comes out of vicissitude, right? The struggle. So why don't we call it infocissitude? like, or in the sense of like, yeah, it's a struggle that's most informative. And that's one thing. Yeah, info system. Yeah, there you go.
That's made up word number 2, and we're only in for 10 minutes so far. Okay, good. One every 5 minutes is pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, so the second one, it has to be rugby, I think, right? Because you know, like we have lots of magic moments in rugby. To me, though, I think the magic moment really came from almost kind of an existential crisis I had. I remember very clearly in bed, talking to, I don't know if I believe in God, but talking to the universe, where, just by way of background, I started playing rugby at Duke, where, as we said, the Duke drinking team had a rugby problem. Wasn't very serious. Won this Rhodes Scholarship. By the way, the definition of a Rhodes Scholarship is someone with a brilliant future behind them. But got the Rhodes Scholarship, went over to Oxford, where it turns out rugby was a big sport. Who knew? And I got very sort of intrigued by this and wanted to have a go at it for various reasons. So the first year I go out and I break my leg in the first game, just snap tibia. So here I am, a dumb sort of lumbering American, now in a hip cast, in 14th century infrastructure of Oxford, and the team was sort of like, well, we don't know what that was. I come back the next year, train all summer, and then having to have surgery for essentially compartment syndrome. So that goes wrong. Third year, train all summer, just committed, like I'm gonna have a go at this, and I am finally selected for the varsity match, like against all odds. I was told this would never happen. Here it is. In the last game against London Irish, I get a knee in the back of my leg that breaks my fibula, which is called a non-weight bearing bone, but that is not true. Believe me, you can't run on it. So literally, I'm looking at this thing in front of me, and it's taken away at the last minute. And this is me in bed the night after that, knowing my leg's broken, knowing that this is going to go by again, and sort of negotiating with the universe, like what is happening here. And I remember vividly seeing a choice in front of me. Like, this is it. You've done your 3 years of Rhodes Scholarship. You can leave Oxford, or there's this other thing you can do. And the other thing scared the living snot out of me. And that's what I chose, right, to get back in and continue to try, keep trying in the full acknowledgement that, like, I would be a very public failure, right? If I come back again, here's this American, he's back again. Oh God. But the expression that my wife has since codified for me since is to find your destiny, follow your fear. It was the fact that it was so terrifying for me, I think, is what made it so, in retrospect, magical, because it was so powerful, right? The thing that scares you the most is almost like calling to you in some sense. I know it sounds deeply mystical, but I am a believer that the unconscious puts these things together in some weird ways, right? What Graham Greene calls a ghostwriter in the cellar. We all have a ghostwriter, and the ghostwriter is putting this stuff together. So that to me was sort of magical. And if I have to name it, I guess I would just sort of call that it wasn't quite a bargain. I guess I will call it grace. GRACE. There was a grace that came with that moment, and I was very angry and very upset and very confused. And yet the reason grace is relevant is because with grace, there's this concept that there's more to this than you're aware of, right? There are other things at work. And again, it sounds pseudo-mystical, but I don't think we acknowledge grace enough in our lives. And by that, I mean actually even luck, right? And so when you start talking about magic moments, I like the fact that you can include failure, because successes don't teach us anything, right? When I'm successful, when I got onto the varsity match, right, when we won that time, it was amazing. But the tendency is to see that as like a result of my hard work, which is certainly true, but also all the luck that had to go into it, right? All the things that had to go right, the people who believed in me, the fact that I didn't get injured again. I mean, these things. So I think that's where grace is really important. All right, third magic moment. By the way, you can cut me off at any point you want. I would say I graduated from Duke with no real idea of what I wanted to do. This is a theme in my life. And I ended up working for a Southern novelist, a guy named Reynolds Price, who was in a wheelchair because he had, about 11 years prior to this time, had a spinal tumor removed that left him essentially a partial quadriplegic. And every year he would hire a graduating senior to basically come live with him and feed him, dress him, and take him around. And he was a hard person to live with. but he literally could not open his mouth without making some observation about the world that was profoundly true. In fact, we called him a truth monger because it would sort of hurt. He would say things to you, you'd be like, oh, come on, man. Like, you can't sugarcoat that a little bit. But I realized this, so the magic moment for me was many years after, I found myself actually quoting back to myself and other people things that Reynolds had said, and realizing that, like, no matter what the package looks like, you got to find, like, the message is probably still worth hearing in some sense, right? No, and there are better and worse ways to communicate it, but there's no message that someone can give me that's so awful that I can't think, there might be something there, right, to learn about that. And so this is what I call, it's, well, I mean, there's a biological term I use for it anyway, which is sort of mutualism, but I consider this sort of symbiosis in the sense that if you can find, as I found with Reynolds, if you can find the wisdom in what people are saying, even if it's not the way you would say it, you can actually make yourself, the message, and other people better through that message. So that's what I mean by symbiosis. You can create virtuous cycles where there's a risk of being a vicious cycle, right? I could resent him, I could push back, and that would create a vicious cycle. And instead, sort of meeting the message where it is, you can create this virtuous cycle. And I think that's really powerful too.
Can we dive into that a little bit more? I think that's really interesting. I think specifically for me, from a perspective of purpose, which is, I suppose, from a practical perspective, I understand kind of firstly probably seeking and finding and kind of comprehending the wisdom in what somebody has said. What would you, if you had to summarize it, what are the practical steps that you can take with that? And obviously it depends partly on what they've said, but if you had to summarize that there was 2 or 3 things you need to do to then be able to take that, share it, move it forward to benefit others, what would you say?
Yeah. So again, I see it now increasingly from the perspective of what I call LQ, or learner quotient. So you're familiar, obviously, with the term IQ, right? Which is this, like, some people are smarter, more intelligent than others, et cetera. I've since come to appreciate the need for people to have strong LQs. And learning involves a couple of different things, but one is seeing everything essentially as feedback, right? Not perfect, unvarnished feedback, but it is feedback. And that also further suggests that you have an obligation, I think, with feedback to sort of do something with it. Now you can dismiss it if you want, but I think it's worth sitting back and thinking, like, I have an opportunity here to get something out of this. And it may be like, this person's a jerk and I never want to work with them again or engage in that. That is fine. Although this is a third part I would take, and why I went into anthropology. It is amazing what the world looks like when you look at it from someone else's perspective. It is amazing how much of your world you do not see. And the whole principle of anthropology is what's called the comparative method. You take different cases and you take them on their own terms, right? So the way the Gabonese do something, the way the French do something, the Austrians, you take it on their own term, but those actually those tell you more about each other and the way they differ. And so I think there's real value to asking, why is this person saying this? Why am I getting this feedback from this source? Which one means you can do more of that feedback, but 2, I think you also have a deeper understanding of this other thing, right? This other, your model of the world can be improved by taking other people's perspectives into it. And that's valuable feedback, because if my model accurate, today than it was yesterday, I will make better decisions. And that's the whole sort of goal of this mental model thing, and why I think, the term I use is intelligible failure. I want to fail in a way that's intelligible, so that it gives me that feedback, so I can improve my model of the world and the people in it. This has gotten crazy philosophical. I'm sorry, but those are muscles, right? I mean, you do it all the time.
Yeah.
And
100%. I mean, no, but there's three very practical steps there, right? Consider everything as feedback, be intentional about what you're going to do with it, and embrace the diverse perspectives on the same thing. We're seeing the same thing, we're seeing it differently. Well, there's something I can take from that, and what do I want to do with that to leave things in a better place? or achieve an objective or whatever that might be. So no, I mean, I love these conversations because of that, because I think all of the terms that you use have a very practical application in delivering in value to the world, right? And what I want to do is I want to just jump back in a little bit, initially to your experience as an athlete, and then I will get your perspective maybe on what you see more broadly beyond that. And that's not just what Connecting with Purpose is about. Most of it's been about actually having conversations with senior leaders. But my personal belief is that elite level athletes have something special to potentially bring to, if you want to say corporate America, but to organizations as a whole. And there's actually a massive gap to be bridged there for a number of different reasons. But if you were just to sort of summarize, you've given us some background and stories into some of the adversity you faced as an athlete and some of the success that you enjoyed as an athlete. But when you think about your journey as an athlete and some of the things you've already said, right? Sort of embracing failure, leaning into fear, seeing feedback and appreciating different perspectives. How would you sort of tell some of your, if you like, athlete journey through the lens of some of those concepts that you've applied?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. Gosh, you're good. You're good at asking big questions, Mark. And it turns out you're actually really good at summarizing more concisely, like what a philosophical ramble like mine is just sort of spews. So that's great too. You're doing God's work. So let's see. First, where do you want to start? You want to start with like my reflection on I'll call it elite, although it sounds hilarious to think of myself ever as an elite athlete. I think, and that's relevant in some sense, because I do think it's not enough to just sort of say elite athletes have X to offer. I think certain kinds of elite athletes have different kinds of things to offer, and it's incumbent, I think, on those athletes to figure out what that is in some sense. And here's the reason I say that is we all know the natural performer, the people who are just good at this thing, at this sport, this performance. The problem with natural performers is they oftentimes don't know why they're good at what they do, right? It's just sort of something they've had to do. So that natural performer will have to bring something different than people like myself, who's far from a natural athlete, but just sort of like had to learn how to do certain things, right? Had to compensate for limitations and weaknesses. But we both have things to offer. And if I had to say what they have in common, I think the first is obviously, even if you're a natural performer, I mean, your work ethic has to be second to none, right? At some point. By the way, we can touch on these strengths as also presenting, I think, real challenges in the transition for the same thing. And then you've got thought. The work ethic, I think that work ethic actually operationalizes itself in a really important way on focus of process. Athletes understand at the end of the day, it is about outcomes, right? You want to win. But to our point, you also realize that winning does not occur in the absence of having strong process. You can win for the wrong reasons. But when you lose, it forces you to think about like, okay, what was the process that led up to that?
Yeah.
And so, thinking through or helping to avoid what Andy Duke calls resulting, judging the quality of a team, a performer, the process solely on the results of the outcome is what Andy calls resulting, and that's not great because it may lead you to draw the wrong conclusions when you win and avoid learning the right lessons when you lose.
And it's not good in life, is it? It's not good it's not good coaching philosophy. It's not a good mindset to have as an athlete, because we're all going to experience failure, and you're not going to have resilience if you don't learn from it. If you only focus on the results and not how you got there. So 100%.
No, I think that's right. I think athletes also bring with them something that I think is underappreciated, certainly in the corporate world, but everywhere else I've worked, which is this notion of like what even performance is. Athletes generally do not have the benefit of thinking, well, it's either physical or it's psychological or it's social, right? Athletes understand that all of these things are in play when it comes to performance. And so, and by the way, I've done some work with the military. The most enlightened military thinkers understand this too. They understand that it's great to be in shape, but not enough. It's great to be smart and well trained, but not enough. It's great to have good leadership, but not enough. And that all these things are sort of pieces of the performance puzzle. that need to be considered. At least you have to be deliberate about it. I think athletes, for the most part, get that in a way that a lot of people in the business world don't understand. They think that performance is just about showing up at work and working hard and being constantly switched on. Meanwhile, their physiology is failing them. Meanwhile, they're sacrificing meaningful relationships that are really important for the sort of social support and trust and cohesion that you and I both appreciate. The teams we've been on that have really we've thrived on have all those things clicking for them. So I think athletes appreciate it.
I simply refer to that as having a whole self, whole life perspective, and that is everybody's current reality, whether they like it or not. But unless you take that as a perspective within which work performance exists, within which athletic or military performance exists, the people that are looking at that as a more holistic system, and it's not about balance, it's about harmony, it's about having enough of the right elements playing into your system that you're able to focus and work and overcome challenges in a way that seems for some people just freakish, right? And then or you're able to just completely be present and engaged and focused and with your kids and have that just look like the amazing parent. And it's a really hard thing to do, but it's impossible to do if you don't ever consider that whole self, whole life perspective, or at least it's impossible to sustain in any one of those particular spheres of life. And I think you're right that it's so obvious for athletes because they're experiencing it week in, week out.
I think that's right. But that's also, so let's talk quickly about how that strength is also a weakness, right?
Yeah.
So I was thinking a little bit about the transition from elite athletics or high level sport to when suddenly you can't do it, or for various reasons, or you decided it's time to get out of it for some reason. I talked earlier about the military. The thing the military does, among many things, that does really well is it recognizes transition as a really powerful thing. It's a powerful time. So in anthropological terms, we would call transition. So a way to think about culture in a way, I love this, it comes from an anthropologist named Mary Douglas, is culture is kind of a house you live in. And what culture helps us do is it helps us know which rooms to put things in, right? So think about like identities or categories. There's animals we have as pets, and there's animals we eat, and we don't cross the two over, right? Sort of things. And every culture will differ in this. But what Mary Douglas points about is transition is when you've stepped out of a room and you're now in the hallway. You don't really belong in any room. And every culture deals with this. And when people are in transition, traditionally people are assigned, they're treated as either like supernatural, sacred, for example. Many sacred things are considered sort of neither worldly, neither heavenly kind of thing, or taboo, or dirty, or impure. Like nothing is sort of considered just sort of neutral when they're in transition. I don't think the United States generally does transition very well. I don't think we acknowledge the need to have things like ritual to go through those transitions to help people move from room through the hallway to the next room. And it's sort of in some cases left to other people. But so the reason I bring this up is you mentioned, like, I'm an athlete, and then I'm a dad, and then I'm a boss and a colleague and a friend. These are all rooms in the house. But when you are an elite athlete, sometimes all your time is spent in that one room, and you both don't think enough about what happens when you have. But also there really aren't that many mechanisms that our culture gives us to make that transition. And the reason that's relevant is because transition is not just a challenge. It really is this profound opportunity. And again, the military recognizes this. It's never that you're just leading a unit. It's also where you're going. And we recognize that transition. And it's a powerful time. They have symbols and rituals. And I think we need more of that, in honesty. And the irony of the whole thing, in some way, is that when you're the elite athlete, when you're consumed in this box, tactically everything around you is focused on your performance. Operational level, it's what you're thinking about and you're consuming, and your friends are about this. Is that you are actually a creature of deep ritual. I mean, think about the things that athletes will do to acknowledge, like, okay, now I'm at the pitch, right? And now I'm in warm up, and there's this sort of mental rituals that people go through to get there. Where are those rituals for when it's time to come home, right? What were the rituals when it's time to stop and step out? And some people do it instinctively. Some people have the benefit of having leaders who talk them through or provide these sort of rituals and transitions. but many elite athletes are sort of left to like, well, you're done now, right? And then you're sort of left in the hallway. Like, what do I do? And I think that's a shame in a very real way. And I think we can. I mean, again, I think one of the reasons why I wish I'd known you 30 years ago was, even if we couldn't find an answer, just having the discussion of things like purpose, right? Allows you to realize that leaving a room and going through a hallway doesn't change your purpose. In fact, the next room you're walking into can still be very focused on that purpose. But that gives you that transition through the hallways. You don't get stuck there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think when you're grounding any kind of transition in purpose, and you can ground lots of things in purpose, obviously, because it's such a foundational concept. But when it comes specifically to transition, each of those rooms in the house are an opportunity to infuse your purpose, to apply your purpose, right, to put it into practice. And the interesting thing is, you're going to do it differently in each room, even though your purpose is the same, because what you see in that room, the people are in that room, the experience that's in the room, the needs that you might see or priorities in that room might be different, but there's still always an opportunity to infuse your purpose. And therefore the transition down the hallway doesn't feel like one where you need to be lost so much as one where it's an opportunity to open the door and see what's in there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that, I sort of get chills when you say that, because my instinct is that's true, but that is not given to us easily in our culture. That's not how we think about it. That's not how we talk about it. And so again, back to the athletes having to be deliberate and intentional. I think this is an example where, we have to be deliberate and intentional about like owning that philosophy and helping each other understand that too. And I don't think I can't remember a whole lot of discussion around this when I was playing rugby, even at the high level. There was very little discussion about the off-ramping. There's very little discussion about, what comes next. Very little. I mean, it was really tactical and operational.
Yeah. I think it's what I've noticed, and it's pretty obvious, I think, in some respects, is there's a lot of similarities between the characteristics of high-performing military folks, veterans, and characteristics of high-performing athletes. And in both worlds, high performance has to exist within a specific sphere of your life, which is in the work sphere, which has to have, to a certain extent, a disproportionate amount of singular focus, especially as an elite athlete performing or a military person on the front lines, where the stakes here are life or death. The stakes here are winning or losing, but it's actually much more beyond that, because it's your life at that point. It's your career, it's your ego, it's your identity. It's pretty much everything you're known for, right? So it's harder to take that whole life, whole self perspective. What you end up having to do is understand the pieces that inform your performance, which is still through the lens of self, right? But looking at those holistically, it's not just about how hard you train, or it's not just about understanding the tactics or following the orders. So the characteristics are the same. There's a lot of work ethic, a lot of focus, a lot of perseverance and determination and resilience, and all of these things that benefit kind of over in the corporate space. When you transition, you lose the structure, you lose the community, both of which are handed to you on a plate. You lose that singular focus. As an athlete, you lose the entertainment kind of aspect of it. And in both instances, you've probably got some physical and mental wear and tear. Now, obviously, when you look at this then from a corporate lens, there are formal programs in place for military and for helping them transition into corporate America, and that's largely because it obviously ticks a very important box of social commitment, social responsibility, in a way that supporting athletes, for whatever reason, doesn't tick that same box. But I do see a lot of similarities. When you look at, if you've got examples of either specific athletes or specific military folks, or just generally actually people that have been absolutely immersed in an area that then had to transition into something completely different, what are the elements of success that you feel people need to own and be supported with that enable them to transition effectively?
Yeah, that's, I've been thinking a lot about that, almost in my head, trying to do like a principal components analysis of what do they have in common. Again, partly because I certainly think I could have done smoother. And I think it generally, it does go back to, well, something I'm working on at the moment, right, with a common acquaintance of ours, Pete Steinberg, is looking at the kind of different mindsets that people can have, and I mean people get to choose to some degree, but we calls for the expert, the engineer, and the explorer mindset. And I promise I'll answer your question, of course, in a roundabout way, because that's what I do. But yeah, and I think when you're in that room, when you're focused on everything about what's happening at the moment, tactically, sport, business, whatever, you are the expert. Like you've got you're expert in deep understanding, deep immersion, this sort of stuff. But I think when you transition, right, you need both an engineer mindset, because you have to begin to understand how these pieces put together, how do these rooms fit together. But I think also this explorer mindset that we're describing, where the explorer mindset is much more about learning. Experts are about knowing, engineers are about designing, and explorers are about learning. And the reason we emphasize that mindset, I think increasingly for most folks, is we live in a world where the complexity is increasing, change is happening at an accelerated pace. Now you add in things like artificial intelligence and synthetic biology. And I think it's entirely plausible to say the world in 25 years could easily look nothing like the world we're in right now. Hopefully it will be a better world. That would be great. That's why I'm doing the work I'm doing in AI, to try to make sure we see the best of all possible worlds. But it will be different. I think the people who have transitioned successfully from the military, from elite athletics, from other rooms, right? They've made it through the hallway, are the explorers. And they've adopted that explorer mindset. So what they are bringing to this is, I'm here to learn. I'm not going to presuppose and assume I know this stuff. And what that means, right, is when you learn, you begin to realize that the things around you really do shape you. It's not just your innate capability and who you are, but you begin to look for the people who have also successfully transitioned, because you're aware that they know stuff that you don't know, and you want to learn from them. When you begin to look for this feedback, you start asking questions like, am I headed in the right direction? What would that even look like, right? What signals would I get that would tell me this thing is good or bad for me, right? From a learner mindset, you begin to realize that you kind of do have to, as you said earlier, actually, when you're an elite sports person, things are handed to you. The environment's handed to you. Your teammates are handed to you. These things are handed to you. And the good coach will know that all those things have influence on your ability to focus and perform. You no longer have that coach when you leave. So find other coaches, right? Find other coaches who can help you understand that you now have to be deliberate about the things you put into your world, the environment you build, the people you talk to, and essentially the muscles you'll be flexing at this point. And I think what's great about the learner mindset that I've seen, or at least the explorer mindset, is there is no wrong, right? It's almost this state of mindfulness where they're being deliberate, and people are, like, in some cases, almost excited about what comes next, because there's no sense that I'm failing here. At least failing in the notion of, like, there's some goal that I'm supposed to be reaching and I'm not getting there. They, on the contrary, realize, like, I've got what I need in the sense of how I think about this stuff. I've got the explorer mindset. Let's get going, right? And I don't know where I'm going to end up in some sense, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to be good for me by using these kinds of tools. And that's it's the ones where there's always the comparison case. The ones who really fail to transition are the ones who have such a predetermined sense of either where they're supposed to be or who they're supposed to be, that I think really the gears begin to slip, because nothing goes according to that. They're still trying to be experts in a world that needs them to be explorers.
Yeah, so that really resonates, the explorer mindset that is all about embracing a learner mindset. And it sounds like the first step is owning that, right? Yep. So firstly, what I like about the three things you said, and I don't know if you'd call them principles, but certainly elements of how to embrace and explore a mindset, which is firstly acknowledging the value in learning. Secondly, having the insight to realize I do know what I don't know. I don't know what the answers are, but at least I've identified the things that I don't know, what the gaps are. And then to appreciate the value in coach, and I'd say even more broadly, like support team, right? Mentors, people that challenge you, people that provide those different perspectives, etc. So yes, you've got to own it, and yes, you've got to commit to it, but you don't have to go it alone. And I think those three elements are important, because you can actually look at those three elements across multiple different lenses, right? So first, I would suggest, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. Step one, if I was working with an elite athlete on this, or a military person, or anyone in transition, in fact, and this is literally what I do. Step one is embracing that explorer mindset through a lens of self, i.e., looking in the mirror, right? So literally starting with know thyself, understanding my own strengths and weaknesses, my own experiences, what's got me to where I've been, where I am now, in order to have some understanding of purpose. Because once you have that, you can start identifying the possibilities ahead. You can look at your potential differently, based upon essentially the essence of your best self that can be applied to make a difference. And I mean a difference in the smallest way, just impacting another person, difference on a team, difference on a customer, difference on a project, all the way up to sort of life-changing stuff. When you look at those sort of those principles of explorer mindset, what are the different lenses through which, or sort of rooms in which you would look to apply them? And is there an order to that, you think, that makes a difference for folks in sort of navigating complex change?
Unpack that a little bit more for me, Mark. Sorry. So by rooms, you mean like scenarios, professional scenarios, or parts of their lives, or what? Yeah,
rooms might not be the best. I think lenses might be better, actually. If you're looking to learn, filling gaps in knowledge and embrace other people in that journey, where do you start? like okay, yeah, I want to learn, but how do you even know what to learn, right? How do you even understand where are the best areas of focus? Do you start with a goal in mind and work backwards, or do you start with self-reflection and really trying to understand how you got to where you're at? Like, what would your approach be for that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because I think, one should be clear that being explorer doesn't mean you're lost, right? It doesn't mean that, like, you don't know sort of where you want to go. It means that you actually may have a very good sense of sort of what you want to do, or how you want to be in the world, the impact you want to have. You just don't necessarily know how it's going to work out, how you're going to get there. So you take little steps and try to get this feedback. So I think, in all honesty, I think really it goes back to this question of, what you call a purpose, and I think that's a good way of putting it, which is, what does right look like? And that's really important to have some sense of at least what it would feel like. In some sense, what does right feel like? Because that's going to tell you, what kind of feedback loops you can use to assess, like, am I heading the right direction or the wrong direction, right? The map says I want to go this way. I've taken a couple of steps here. I've run into something that's not supposed to be on this map. I know now I'm in the wrong place. I know that I'm not headed the right direction, and I can redirect. The challenge. So again, this is a transition from the expert mindset to the explorer mindset. Is as an athlete, you were so good at what you did, right? And yes, games are out of your control. Yes, there were certain things circumstances that were, that you could not directly affect, but you knew what you knew, right? And you could tell if you're on. You knew if the team was gelling. And now you're in this world as explorer mindset, like, you don't know that, right? You have to acknowledge, like, I'm not an expert any longer. And that can be hard for an ego to acknowledge. So I really think it's some combination too of having this notion of purpose, realizing, as you said earlier on, and very, very astutely, that purpose can be manifested in very different ways in the different rooms you're in. But knowing that, you're not going to know what that looks like. So you need to really be willing to build up those cycles of being wrong, and being wrong as quickly as possible, because that's how you get to be less wrong. And I realize this is wildly philosophical, but it can operationalize as something as simple as going to coffee with someone, having a conversation about something you were looking forward to, or a plan you were trying to engage. getting some feedback from them and realizing like, I hadn't thought about that. I need to update, right? I need to maybe revise my plans, or I need to revisit, or alternatively, that's interesting. I can see why people would say that, but I still feel X. That is still feedback that can only take place, the warning can only take place when you are not convinced that you are an expert.
Yeah.
Experts are threatened by not knowing, right?
Yeah, I really do. This for me really underscores the importance of purpose in effective exploration when you don't necessarily know where you're going, right? Because there's a difference between exploring and wandering aimlessly, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Explorers are exploring with intent, but you may not know. You certainly don't know the answer, because otherwise you wouldn't need to explore in the first place. But you don't necessarily even know where you're going, but you know why it feels right. And so that could be the coffee chat. It could be being an intern in a new job and just testing out and seeing what happens. Because as long as it aligns to your values, it aligns to you enabling to show elements of your best self sort of characteristics. It enables you to feel like you've got some good relationships and things that are important to you. So what feels right, what looks right and feels right for you, has to be a pretty powerful starting point, because otherwise you don't have anything to navigate you through the exploration.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and you're right. So, and this is the interesting part is I'm wondering now, and I'm in the process of hopefully still doing this even at ISI, is how do you inculcate explorer mindsets into individuals, but then also how do you build explorer organizations, right? How do you build bigger, in fact, teams? How do you build teams that are explorer teams? And that requires even more challenge, or that prevents even more challenge, because now you have individuals who also now have to collectively pool their information, right? We as a team need to learn, and as an organization, we need as an organization to fail a lot, but also learn from that in this intelligent failure, and be willing to, as you say, redirect or try new things, and build in new feedback loops, and be willing to acknowledge like this isn't working and revector. That traditionally is not a strength of organizations, right? Organizations pride themselves on, in fact, almost being these sort of stable, future charting courses. So, I don't know how you feel about this. I'd be interested, but people come and they talk to me about strategy, and I just have to chuckle a little bit, because the notion that you're going to put in place a strategy for the next 5-10 years, at least in terms of like, these are the following steps we will take to achieve the future. I mean, good luck with that, right? Because I think it's, to me, strategy is a how. It's not a what. You may have a sense of where you want to go, but to me, the strategy is, I want to build an explorer organization. That's our strategy. We want to learn fast and faster than we have before, because that's how we're going to realize what right looks like.
Yeah, I'll probably use slightly different terminology. My very short answer would be that you need a clear vision of what success looks like that's far enough out that it's tangible, and maybe achievable, but very stretchy, right? It's not a goal in 1 year's time, but so right, that's just the direction. So you need, if you want to call that vision, that would be one way of determining. Yeah. And then at the bottom is the purpose. And so for me, the strategy fits in the middle, which are some of the priorities, but the process should be the explorer process. But if you haven't got some form of vision, and it doesn't need to be as tangible as the specific priorities and goals, because that will come out through exploration and help inform the strategy. But you do need to know why you're doing it, and that shared buy-in to both the vision and the purpose, I think, is really important. And as we're having this conversation, I've got scribbling all these notes, and I should have just done a 2-hour podcast with Adam and then cut it into a couple of different ones. But I want to just close out quickly, just for last few minutes back with you. One, out of personal interest, your purpose. I'd love for you to just share with folks what that is, and not necessarily sort of when you look back and sort of now I know I've articulated it, I can see how it's played out. But you've got that now. What do you want to do with it? Like, what are you looking to do with your purpose in your transition away in your life?
All right, so we might as well end on another neologism, right? That you're familiar with, but I describe it as I want to help people be gooder, and through various mechanisms, however I can. But I use the term gooder specifically because because I think our culture puts a premium on optimization, on making things better in the sense of more, more efficient, more powerful, more profitable, whatever. But we can do lots of things better and still end up in a really bad place, as we've seen, right? I can make people much better at achieving deeply selfish ends. And you see this in the performance too, right? People say, I want you to help me with my performance. And what they mean is, I want you to help me like beat out my colleagues for a promotion. And it's like, okay, I mean, got it, understood. But I would like you also to ask the question of like, is that gonna make you gooder? Are you doing more good as a result? And more importantly, is the place gooder for you doing this? And that's because we increasingly live in a world in which I can do things that are great for me, but because of how we're interconnected, may be really bad for other people, right? Could have really negative consequences that ultimately come back to redound on me. So when you start talking about, as you said, this purpose of helping people be gooder, I suddenly realized how many rooms I've walked through and how many rooms are ahead of me where what helping people be gooder looks like will be so different, but I think still is worth, it's worth the fatigue. It's worth it's worth being a learner and an explorer where I'm never really certain I know what I'm doing, but I kind of know like what right looks like. Am I helping people be gooder? Along those lines, especially now in a place like artificial intelligence, where I think we have an opportunity to be even gooder than we've ever been, but it's going to take deliberate, intentional approach to that. Like I said, I hope we can realize the best of all possible worlds. But if you ask me, like, what does making people or helping people be gooder look like in 5 years? I don't know. But I can tell you, I'll still be in that fight.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, let's just close out with this. When you think through the lens of edutaining people and helping people be gooder, which to me sounds like it's good for me, it's good for me, and maybe even good for world, right? And at least you're tagging in me plus in terms of sort of the methodology for that. What's on the horizon? What's the next few years look like for you in terms of how you're looking to do gooder, if you were able to summarize it into kind of a top three?
Top three. So continue to explore how to build good organizations, how to build cultures of being gooder. So certainly explore organizations. My own institute, where I sit at USC, I think we need new business models, and so that's number one, is like really walk the walk and get my hands dirty and realize how often I'm going to fail, but how do I learn quickly from that failure? How do we all learn from that? The second, therefore, would be, well, what do you do with that learning? And so I'm thinking about how do I communicate that most effectively. So working on a book. I know the world probably needs another book like this, like a hole in the head, but if nothing else, the book will help and is helping clarify, kind of like boiling it down, the essentials of this, at least from where I sit and from the wisdom of other people we're talking to. What I love most about this book is it's given me the opportunity, like you have on this podcast, to go and talk to people, and increase my view.
Shared wisdom, yeah. Absolutely.
And the third, in honesty, will be continuing to push kind of the gospel of, I won't say coaching, but acknowledging. So I have the 4 C's where I work. We promote competence, we promote character, we promote contributions, we also promote connections. And I think we just need to really sort of embrace this notion of connection much more seriously, because you don't know who's going to be a good coach. You don't know who knows stuff you don't know. You don't know who you're going to learn from. And the reason I think that's relevant, so I have another podcast myself, and we always end on the statement of, in the face of this kind of complexity, we have to begin to do what humans, I think, uniquely are suited to do, which is to act as if our lives depend on each other, because they do. Yeah. And whether or not we're aware of that. So I'm going to continue to sort of promote this notion of connection, so that we might be able to make decisions that acknowledge, like, we kind of are all in this together.
Okay, so I'm just going to summarize that, because what's really brilliant with what you just said is you literally just completely verbatim listed out the same 3 exact practices, right, that you need to be an explorer. And this is you walking the walk. So you are exploring what good organizations look like as Explore organizations, applying that learning and sharing that wisdom, distilling it down through a book and other things you'll be able to do as well, of course, like podcasts. And then really pushing the gospel of coaching for connection and this sort of interconnectedness of people. So pretty awesome, right? You've got all these, all the theories and all the labels and all the words I can't spell, but in practical form, and you're living it. And I really appreciate that. Really enjoyed the conversation, Adam. Love your energy. Always love our interactions. So thank you so much for joining us and spending this time with us on Connecting with Purpose.
Hey, Mark, it was my pleasure, and keep up the good work, man. I'm glad you're out there doing this.
Will do, mate. Take care.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye.
See ya.